Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan, and my guest today is Dr. Paul Kolodzik. I think I got that right. Okay. And can I just call you Paul?
Yes. Yeah, you
Okay,
can call me
good.
anything. Yeah.
Well, no, we won't go that far. But
Okay.
and Paul has been working with a lot of people around weight and losing weight and diabetes and all of this. And I'm going to let him give us his little history and what he's working on now. So welcome, Paul. Good to have you here.
All right. Thank you very much. I have a metabolic health practice in Ohio. People ask what metabolic health is, and it's basically maintaining optimal weight, waist circumference, blood pressure, cholesterol, etc. And that's an issue a lot of middle-aged Americans struggle with. My background is 25 years in the emergency department as an emergency physician. So
Wow.
basically, what gets all the press in the emergency department is the gunshot wounds and the overdoses and all that type of
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah.
the bread and butter for emergency physicians is the vascular disease we see, the congestive heart failure,
Okay.
the heart attacks, the strokes, the
Uh-huh.
kidney disease, the peripheral vascular disease.
Wow.
And after many years taking care of those problems in the emergency department, I decided I wanted to try and get out in front of that about 8 years ago
Mm.
in terms of trying to prevent it. And that grew out of a philosophy of me believing that by keeping your blood sugar low and your weight under control, you can control a vast majority of those potential medical problems. So I've put my metabolic health practice together, Metabolic MDs, just like it sounds, metabolicmds.com in Ohio. And I'm now treating patients either in Ohio in my offices or in Ohio, Indiana, Florida, or Arizona, helping
Wow.
people lose weight, reverse metabolic disease, reverse prediabetes, improve hypertension, et cetera. And as you and I will
Hmm.
talk about, I've got kind of a unique approach to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is a great intro. So why don't you tell us about your unique approach?
Okay. I believe in the use of continuous glucose monitors. So the term
Mhm.
that's used for those is CGMs. And those are the devices that you've seen on the back of the arms of diabetics. And diabetics have been using these devices for about 15 years for the purposes of monitoring their blood glucose and often knowing how much insulin to administer.
Hmm.
But these are tremendously valuable devices to be used in non-diabetics and pre-diabetics as well. And the reason that I believe they're so valuable after using them over the course of the last 5 to 7 years is that people can use them to evaluate what's going on with their blood sugar 24/7. You get a 24/7 real-time readout of your blood glucose using these devices. And that can help guide your diet in terms of a low carb approach. And I've just had a lot of success with helping people lose 25, 40, 60, even more pounds. And more
Wow.
importantly than that, helping them get healthier. People reverse
Hmm.
prediabetes, reduce insulin requirements if they're diabetic, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. And it makes life a lot easier when you're not carrying all that weight around.
Absolutely. I mean, the excess weight, again, over 30 years in the emergency department, what I learned is that what leads to the greatest number of health problems is excess weight and high blood glucose. And and
Hmm.
and can I go through the physiology of this a little bit, how blood
Sure.
leads to high
Sure.
weight?
That'd be
Okay.
interesting. Yeah.
So
Yeah. You're
I'm gonna give
talking
you
to to a geek on all this
all
kind of
right.
stuff. So
Good,
that's why
good.
I do this podcast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you do a good job of it. I've listened to a
Oh,
number
thank
of
you.
them.
Oh, thank
So,
you.
so the historical issue here is that we were all told in the 1980s that fat was evil, that we had to reduce our fat intake at all costs. The food pyramid came out, and we were told that we just needed to eat heart healthy foods with no fat, which basically translated means carbs. We needed
Yeah.
to eat a lot more carbs and we needed to avoid fat. We hadn't eaten that way for generations in the US, and even if you want to
Yeah.
go back thousands of years.
Mm.
And so, literally, for the first time in history, nearly overnight, the American diet went from 50% fat, 25% carbs, and 25% protein
Uh-huh.
to 50% carbs, 25% fat, and 25% protein. And I believe it's unmistakable that that's when the epidemics of diabetes and obesity took off in this country. If you follow the curves from the early 1980s
Uh-huh.
on, it's a direct result of the food habits. And then, of course, I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist, but the food processors kind of jumped on the bandwagon of the least expensive food to make is seed oils, which is the worst kind of oils, corn oil and
Yeah.
soybean oil,
Yeah.
sugar, and refined flour, high carb foods. And so we went and followed the food
Oh,
pyramid and we started eating processed foods, and the rest is history, such that now 60% of middle-aged Americans are overweight. And so my goal
wow.
in life is to help people address that excess weight and the metabolic disease that inevitably comes with it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, that is kind of interesting because what comes to mind is, then, because as told you when we were talking beforehand, I mean, I was a fat little kid, and a fat teenager, and a fat undergraduate, and then lost weight. Thank God. But is like Weight Watchers. I mean, my mother took me to Weight Watchers,
Yeah.
right?
So yeah, so this is my opinion, and I'm going to go back to the physiology a
Hmm.
little bit, and then I'll explain
Well,
why.
they
I
changed. They have changed as well.
a
But back
little bit, yeah,
then, yeah,
they have changed a little bit because they followed a lower carb approach. That's how they've changed. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, but the physiology is this, is that when you eat, and I'm not saying carbohydrates are evil, but they really need to
no,
be, I think, limited in the diet. An interesting
they
side
have a
fact.
place. They have a
Yeah,
place, but it doesn't have to be
exactly.
the main.
It shouldn't be 50% of our diet. I think it should be more like 15 to 20% of our
Yeah.
diet.
Uh-huh.
And an interesting side fact is
Uh-huh.
you need protein to live. The three macronutrients are protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Everything we eat falls into
Okay.
those categories. You need protein and you need fat, but you actually can live without any carbs at all. So, but the physiology is what when you eat carbohydrates, whether it's a simple carbohydrate, which is a sugar, or a complex carbohydrate like we think of with bread or rice or
Mm,
pasta or whatever,
mm,
as soon as it gets absorbed in your gut, it becomes sugar. It becomes blood glucose. And that's just the way it is. And historically, what has happened now is that Americans' blood glucose has risen. That's why we have such a high percentage of diabetes and pre-diabetes in the
uh-huh.
country. And when that
Mm-hmm.
blood sugar rises, then the organs try and take that in. I'm not going to try and get
Mm,
too technical here, but the pancreas releases insulin,
mm-hmm.
essential organ releasing an essential hormone, and the insulin is kind of the key in the lock to allow
Uh-huh.
that blood glucose into your cells. And when I say cells, I'm going to ask you to think muscles in general because it's one of
Mm,
the largest organs we have. But
okay.
after a while, those muscles, if the blood sugar has been high for a while, that blood sugar it is not needed anymore by those
Mm-hmm.
organs. And
Mm-hmm.
so those organs say, insulin, we aren't going to listen to you anymore. We don't need any more energy. We've got all the blood
Yeah.
glucose, the complex blood glucose molecules in our organs that we need. We're going to resist you, insulin. So basically,
Uh,
that's what insulin resistance is. It's the organ saying they aren't going to listen to the insulin. Well, the pancreas doesn't get the message, and the pancreas just keeps kicking out insulin, and insulin levels get higher and higher. And that's really what happens in the context of insulin resistance. And then, unfortunately, what happens, and the reason for most of the obesity and overweight in America is that extra blood glucose has to go somewhere. It just can't keep rising, and the organs are not accepting it because they're resisting insulin. So it
mm-hmm.
goes to the liver and it gets converted to fat.
Oh, yeah.
That's if you've heard the term fatty liver
Fatty
disease.
liver.
Fatty
Yeah.
liver disease
Yeah.
comes from. And then that extra fat gets deposited around the middle. And so that the reason, in essence, for Americans' overweight problems now is excessive carbs since the food pyramid came out in the
Mm.
1970s.
Mhm.
And so what I do with my patients is use the continuous glucose monitors again in non-diabetics and sometimes
Uh-huh.
pre-diabetics. And we use this as a roadmap for their low carb diets because we reverse that process. We bring the blood glucose down. And if we
Okay.
bring the blood glucose down, after a while, those organs, again, let's say the muscles, are looking around saying, hey, we need energy here. Where's the blood glucose? But you've limited your carb intake, so there's less blood glucose around. And so what happens? Those muscles say, we still need energy here. And what do? Oh, they look down at the middle and they say, there's a source of energy. And that's that fat around the middle that we have. And so those
Ah.
fatty acids start getting broken down as a source of energy. And that's how you effectively lose weight on a low carb diet. Now, if you get in a very
Okay.
aggressive low carb diet, you get into the keto range. If everybody's
Right.
heard of
Yep.
the keto
Yep.
diet,
Been there,
and
done that.
ketones,
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, ketones are a breakdown product. Yeah, most of my patients don't go all the way to keto. We just focus on low carb, but ketones are a breakdown product. If
Hmm.
I can, the simplest way to think about this, and I use this analogy with my patients, is think about the bear before the winter time. The bear is out in the fall and it's foraging for berries and roots. And it really, what it's doing is searching for carbs and it's driving that blood glucose up. And those organs inside the bear are saying, we've got plenty of blood glucose. We don't need any more. So same thing happens. The extra blood glucose goes to the liver, gets converted to fat, and the bear fattens up around the middle. Well, the bear goes and sleeps for 4 or 5 months and it lives off the fatty acids we were just
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. Most Americans have food at our fingertips 24/7. So we just
Yeah.
keep eating. So what I'm trying to do is kind of emulate the bear that burns all those fatty acids over the winter and then comes out in the springtime thinner. And that's
Hmm.
what we do with our patients using the continuous glucose
Mm.
monitors as a guide.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think the other point in there as well, right, is that the other part of leading a healthy life is to do something physical,
Absolutely.
exercise,
Yeah.
whatever it happens to be, which which if you want to look back at the bear, that's, he fattens
Mhm.
himself up because he's not going to be doing anything.
Right.
He needs something to live off of. But then he
Yeah.
goes out and he exercises and kills other things and eats them or whatever that happens to do,
Yeah.
and it all starts over
And it all
again.
starts again. Yeah.
But
And,
yeah,
and
good.
since you mentioned exercise, let's talk about
Uh-huh.
that. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So my plan for my patients, and again, all my patients are middle-aged, kind of what is termed a lot of my patients are what's termed metabolic syndrome. Are you familiar with that
Yes.
term?
Yes.
And again, it's the typical
Yeah. You might
overweight.
want to just, yeah, just
Yeah.
just kind of tell people to,
Overweight, increased waist circumference,
mm,
high blood pressure, high cholesterol, kind of the typical middle-aged overweight American.
mm-hmm,
And so part of this insulin resistance issue, and we got to return to that for in a second, but let me
mm-hmm,
make a point about exercise. Part of this insulin resistance issue is that it's critical to lower insulin resistance so you can lose weight. Well, a very important approach to do that is to have adequate muscle mass. And the reason for that
mm-hmm,
is if you have adequate muscle mass,
mm-hmm.
then those insulin receptors on your muscles soak up more insulin and they soak up more blood glucose than they would
Oh,
otherwise.
okay.
So
Okay.
I'm kind of an outlier as a metabolic health doc because when people come in my office, there's two things I work with them on. First of all is we check their cholesterol and
Mm-hmm,
we look at the big picture. And for the vast majority, after testing their insulin, I do a fasting insulin test, which most docs don't do. So I
mm,
know my patient's exact level of insulin resistance.
mm-hmm,
So what we do then is put a program together that addresses that insulin resistance. And strength training is part of that. Okay. You just heard me talk about muscle mass.
Hmm.
Very, very important for middle-aged people. Very, very important for middle-aged women because of the potential osteoporosis issue as you get
Oh,
older.
yeah, I know.
Yeah. And
My
so,
mom had that. Yeah,
yeah. And so I
nasty.
actually have a chapter in the new book
Uh-huh.
that is titled Get Off the Gosh Darn Cardio Machines. People like to go to the gym and spend their time on the elliptical and the
Yeah.
bikes and the cardio machines. But where the money's at for most middle-aged Americans is increasing your muscle mass a little bit so that you go
Wait.
ahead and soak up more insulin, and that's going to help you lose weight. So my program is a combination of a low carb diet, but the focus is
Uh-huh.
strength training. So you walk into my
Yeah.
office and you're going to hear something different than you hear from your doctor most of the time. One is the first
Mhm.
thing is you need to eat more fat and lower carbs. Okay.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing how cholesterol levels and triglyceride levels don't go up when I do this after nearly 1,000 patients.
Yeah.
Um, so I tell them to eat more fat, and the other thing I tell them is to spend less time doing cardiac workouts and spend more time in the weight room. So, I'm a
Hmm.
little bit of an outlier in terms of that, but over nearly 1,000 patients now, it's worked great. And I think the rest of the world will come around. It's just going to take some time
Oh,
because
yeah.
medicine changes very slowly.
That's true. That's very true, especially with as much money as is in there now.
Absolutely. I mean, this is not a let's prescribe you a statin approach. Okay. This
Right.
is let's look at the big picture. If I
Yeah.
can mention, basically we
Uh-huh.
talked about weight loss and what the different approaches are. There's basically two approaches. One is the calorie restriction, energy
Mm.
in, energy out model. And that's
Hmm.
basically you just need to eat fewer calories than you expend and
Right.
you'll lose weight. And that's true. Okay. But
Hmm.
I don't think that's sustainable for a lifetime. For most people, it's not. And I think the better model is the one that we're talking about, the insulin resistance model,
Mm.
in which basically you try and lower your carb intake, lower your level of insulin resistance, and burn those fatty acids, just as we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah. No, it's true. It is yeah, because we actually my husband and I just ended up going back to the gym finally. Because both of our gyms, we went to different gyms and both of them closed during
Oh,
COVID,
yes.
never to be reopened.
Yeah,
Right.
that's too bad.
Yeah. So then it was like, okay, now we got to find one. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do me a favor
So,
and spend more time
yeah.
on the weight machines than you do on the cardio machine.
Yeah, I know. I know. Exactly. Exactly. Actually, what I need to do is I need to learn how to walk
Yeah.
and pick
Yeah.
up my feet
Yeah. Walking is great too.
because I've ended up, no, I just, I'm much better, but I've taken a few not insignificant falls
Yeah.
from
That's
not
tough.
picking up my feet, you
Yeah.
know, and
So
tripping.
and I think muscle strength has a lot to do that.
Yes.
The phrase in the gym, the thing that people kid each other about is don't skip leg day. Do your leg workouts, do
Yeah.
your squats and
Yeah.
lunges, and that's part of
Oh,
that.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, working in the emergency department for 30 years, I've seen a lot of people fall, and some of that is just they don't have the leg strength to, if they stumble a little bit, to get their balance, or just don't have leg strength. So leg
Yeah.
strength is a big part of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. No, and I've been working on that because every time I fall, I lose whatever leg strength I had.
Yeah.
It's just like
It's
boom, gone.
critical. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. Yes. In fact, I'm still getting over some of the scabs from the last one, but
Okay.
um, yeah, I don't know why. Oh, anyway, so I was thinking, I think the other issue with going to a gym or whatever is that a lot of people just always do the same things, period.
Yeah.
Whether it's the right things or the wrong things,
Yeah.
they don't switch things up at
Yeah.
all. And they don't want to pay. I'm saying this from my own personal experience, right? you don't necessarily want to pay for somebody. You're already paying for the gym. You don't want to pay
A
for
trainer.
somebody to
Yeah.
coach you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it becomes this you know, round and round and round and round, and you're not getting off and doing the other
Right.
things.
Right. And we work on that with our patients. I work with a
I'm
personal
sure.
trainer,
Yeah.
nutrition coach, and we set up rotating workouts so people can get there.
Hmm.
Can I tell you a little bit about what I do with the new patient when they come in to see me?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So my patients a lot of times self-select because they're a little bit overweight to begin with. They might have
Mm-hmm.
diabetes that runs in their family. They may be concerned
Okay.
about some metabolic health issues. So the first thing we do is bring them in for a couple weeks and we measure their baseline studies. We see where their cholesterol is, but most
Okay.
importantly, we see what their insulin level is. And we calculate an exact level of insulin resistance on them. And then we put a continuous glucose monitor on their arm. And I say to people, don't change your diet. Just, eat like you normally eat. I want to see
Uh-huh.
where you live in terms of your blood glucose patterns. And then they get to follow their blood glucose. Basically, I should describe the CGM in more detail.
Yeah.
So it's a device that goes on the back of the arm. It puts a
Okay.
very tiny filament under the skin. The
Uh-huh.
filament equilibrates with the blood glucose in the capillaries in that area. And then the sensor on the back of the arm transmits that data to a smartphone app. And so 24/7, you can see exactly what your blood glucose is. So we put this on, and a lot of times people that come to me because they want to lose 25 or 30 pounds all of a sudden realize their blood sugar is spiking to 180. They're pre-diabetic.
Whoa.
They're
Yeah.
spiking to 225. They're actually diabetic. And so, as one patient put it to me, once you see those spikes on the CGM,
Mm-hmm.
you can't unsee that. You know what some of the food you're eating is doing
Mm-hmm.
to you. And it can be, and it has been life changing for a number of my patients.
Good.
Um, and then they come back and we talk about their data, we talk about their level of insulin resistance, and we put a plan together, which includes a low carb targets, getting adequate protein, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
include some intermittent fasting.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important tool to lower insulin resistance as well. And then strength training as well. And very occasionally later on with the patients, I'll use some, yeah, I'm sure everybody's heard of the new FDA approved weight loss medications that have been in the press
Mm.
lately, Ozempic and the like. Very
Yeah.
occasionally, I'll use those in patients that get a stall as well. But most
Mm.
of the focus in my practice, and again, I see patients in Ohio, Indiana, Florida, and Arizona, it is to focus on lowering the carb intake, doing some fasting, lowering insulin resistance, increasing muscle mass. And it's really a very good program for people in terms of progress over a period of time. And
Mm-hmm.
quite honestly, one of the reasons I'm doing this after spending years in the emergency department is it's very satisfying. I mean, when you see a
Oh, I
teenager
bet. Yeah.
lose 70 pounds and their family history is full of diabetes, and you know that they have
Mm.
altered their life, or when you see somebody that loses 60 pounds and now can do activities with their family that they couldn't do it before, and that their future health is going to be impacted by that,
Yeah.
it's very satisfying.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting too because everybody's got like their own story of how they ended up that way,
Yeah, yeah,
right? The
yeah,
details, the overall where you started and where you end up are similar, right? But the tr- the trip
yeah, the journey.
is yeah, the journey is so different for different people, and it usually has something to do with your family.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
it is, and we look at that because the approach I take, there's got to be some
Uh,
family buy-in on this.
yes, they have
If
to be
you try to
supporting
get
you.
yeah, yeah, and it's very important. We have families come in and we just kind of talk about what the plan is. Most of my patients have their spouses, or
Oh,
even
good.
teenagers join them in this
Yeah.
effort. But once the goal here is not a diet. The goal here is a lifestyle
Right.
change.
That's right. Yep.
And when you're doing the things that we just talked about, you're limiting your carbs, you're doing some intermittent fasting, you're doing some strength training,
Hmm.
then that actually there's an evolution that takes place in people's minds. They don't think about looking at a dessert menu anymore. I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
once maybe in a great while for a special occasion, but they don't think about the bread before dinner. They just push it out of the way or say to the waitress, no, thank you, because they feel so much better. One of the issues with blood glucose is not only that it's high, but it's variability. Okay,
Mm.
because what the typical thing is you eat a fair number of carbs, your blood sugar spikes, then your insulin gets released, and then the insulin overshoots the mark and your blood sugar drops. That's the
Mhm.
infamous sugar crash that people
Okay.
experience.
Okay.
And it leads to fatigue and brain fog. And once with this type of diet using a CGM as a guide, once you level those curves out, so instead of going like this, your readers or your listeners can't see me, but I'm waving my hand up and down.
Well, some
And
of them can. I do post a
okay,
video, so
oh,
there you
you
go.
post a video. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, good. Well, I'm glad you told me that. But once you even those out, people
Uh-huh.
feel so much better.
Yeah.
And it really, I mean, it impacts energy significantly. And then obviously, it improves, issues like high blood pressure, symptoms of, for example, fatty liver disease, which can cause abdominal
Mm,
pain, gastroesophageal
mm.
reflux. People sleep better. I'm not saying it's a panacea. I'm not saying it's,
No.
a magic approach, but I really think that people's lives can change by following this kind of approach. And when they evolve to a lifestyle change like this, they don't go back because they feel so much better.
Yes, yes, yes. And they usually can feel it when they've gone off it, they
Yeah,
splurged or something or whatever it is, and they'll go, "Oh, I'm not going to do that anymore."
right, right.
Yeah.
Um, so I outlined this. I got to put a plug for the book in, which I haven't done yet, right? So, and
Right.
since it's visible, since people can see it, this is it.
Ah, okay.
So it's called the Continuous Glucose Monitor Revolution,
Uh-huh.
for non-diabetics. And again, because diabetics have used these devices for a long time, but non-diabetics have not. And we kind of go through in the book, the early chapters are the whole history. It starts really with when you go in to see your doctor every year, a lot of time your doctor doesn't have time to address the types of issues that we're talking about right now.
No
I can
kidding.
see by the
Or
expression
anything
on
else for
your
that
face.
matter.
Yeah. Well, so I'll give you a
Unless
little
it's
history.
extreme.
Yeah, I'll give you a little history on that. So when I got out of medical school, it was still back in an era where doctors were just joining small private practices or even hanging
Yeah.
out a shingle on their own. They were
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, they were the business owner. And
Yeah.
I practice sometimes in some rural areas, and these docs were pillars in their community. They knew everybody.
Thank
They
you.
delivered babies when they were young, and they took
Mm-hmm.
care of the same person when they were old.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and unfortunately now, and I'm not slamming the primary care docs, but most of them now work for hospitals or health systems, or worse yet, groups owned by private equity. And it's like 20 minutes. You got 20 minutes for your annual or semi-annual appointment. And what do we have time to do during that period of time? Well, we have time to tweak your blood pressure medicine, maybe go ahead and say we need to add something for your high blood sugar.
Right.
But we don't really have time to get to the root cause of the issue. So I actually go through that
Yeah.
early in the book. Then we talk about a little bit about the macronutrients so people understand that. And then we get into the insulin resistance model so people understand how they can change that. And then the prescription part of the book comes through with let's talk about what your low carb targets should be. Let's talk about what your protein targets should be. Let's see what an intermittent fasting plan might look like. Let's
Mm-hmm.
see what your workout plan should look like. Again, with an emphasis on strength training over cardio.
Yeah.
And then I have some case scenarios in the book as well. But it's been very well received, and I think this kind of practice it is a
Mm-hmm.
movement now. There's a number of
Yeah.
metabolic health physicians across the country now. I got a good friend in
Ah,
San
good.
Diego, since you're from California. Got another
Uh-huh.
good friend in New York, one down in North Carolina.
Wow.
And practices like mine are popping up, and people can get this kind of help that can complement what their doctor does, but unfortunately their doctor does not have the time and sometimes the expertise to address these issues.
Right. Yeah. 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 Unfortunately, it kind of goes hand in hand, right? I mean, I don't think it's necessarily because they don't want to. They just have shackles on them as far
They're
as how much
frustrated.
time and
Yeah,
their education
yeah.
and
Yeah, I got
yeah.
a lot of good friends that are primary care doctors, and they're
Hmm.
frustrated that they
Hmm.
can't do for their patients what they want to do. And I
Right.
actually have a significant referral base from my practice. I mean, initially when I was doing this, I was hearing from a couple primary care docs like, what are you doing over there? And then
Uh-huh.
their patients come back and they've lost 30 pounds and they're able to take them off their blood pressure medicine. Or
Wow.
the one that I really get a lot of, there's two things I really get a lot of satisfaction out, and that is
Mm.
diabetics that I'm able to completely get off their diabetic medicine. It doesn't mean they aren't diabetic anymore, but
Hmm.
I actually have patients that we've got completely off their insulin and oral medicine.
Wow.
And then the other is pre-diabetics, where you completely reverse pre-diabetes. Um,
Wow.
Pre-diabetes is completely reversible. The health system now looks at pre-diabetes as kind of, oh, we'll keep an eye on it. We'll just kind of keep an eye on your
Yeah.
blood sugar. We'll see what it looks like next year.
Yeah.
But in my mind, when you're pre-diabetic, lights and sirens should be going off, because
Yeah.
that's when you can reverse it. It means you already got insulin resistance. You can go ahead and reverse it completely so you
Hmm.
never go on to diabetes. 30% of American adults right now are pre-diabetic.
Oh,
30% of American adults are pre-diabetic.
wow.
And half of those that are pre-diabetic don't know they're pre-diabetic.
I'm
Um, it,
sure.
it, and I see a lot of that in my office. Again, we slapped the continuous glucose monitor on during the 2-week trial, and
Oh,
and people are pre-diabetic, occasionally even diabetic, but pre-diabetic, and they have no idea. And once
yeah.
they see the curves on the CGM, once they understand what's
Yeah.
really going on, they get motivated to change.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm trying to think back. Yeah, I don't remember anything about the being pre-diabetic or anything like that when I was fat and
Okay.
younger, a lot
Yeah.
younger.
Yeah.
Um, but
It-
uh, but that was a long time ago too. So
yeah. But if you're overweight and you have diabetes in your family, there's a good chance you got insulin resistance going on.
I don't actually. That's what's so
Yeah.
funny. Not
Well,
funny, but
you're a thin person
now, yes,
now.
yes,
You are.
yeah. For
Yeah.
more years than I was fat. Yeah, but I
Okay.
was a
Yeah.
fat kid. I was really
Well,
a fat kid.
you
Yeah,
addressed it.
yeah,
Good.
yeah. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. But yeah. Actually, I'll tell you my 20-second story is I I went to Cal to in Berkeley,
Yeah.
and at that point, Cal still had a hospital where they took
Yeah.
care of all the students, which
Yeah.
they don't have anymore either.
Yeah.
Um, and I had gone in, a wonderful doctor I had hooked up with, and she sat me down when I was in graduate school and said, "Look, now's the time you got to lose the weight. You don't lose the weight now, you're going to be fighting it the rest of your life."
Yeah.
And I
Well,
said, "Okay, what do I need to do?" And she gave me a diet to follow, and it was okay enough to, it
yeah.
was just healthy, right? It was
Yeah.
learning
Good.
health stuff. Yeah. So I mean, we're talking about the 1970s.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
Life was a
when
lot
that,
different then. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm glad you didn't follow the food pyramid completely.
No,
So
no, there was no
yeah.
food pyramid at that point.
I think 72 is when it came out. It really didn't get
Really? Oh,
popular
I
until
never
the late
saw it. I
70s,
didn't see
early
it until
80s.
like the
Yeah.
80s.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't see it. Because I have my patients follow the low carb food pyramid, which is basically the inverse of the real food pyramid. But
Ah,
yeah.
okay.
So what I have them do is limit carbs and
Hmm.
target a given amount of protein, like 50 grams of carbs or less a day, maybe get 100 or 125 grams of protein a day.
Hmm.
And then I actually don't track the fat. I mean, if somebody has a significant cholesterol issue, we'll look at it. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you, this is amazing. I put people on a low carb, high fat diet because low carb diets have more fat. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And their cholesterol levels don't change significantly. They might
Okay.
go up a few points, down a few points. I'll tell you what changes is triglycerides. Triglycerides drop often like a rock on a low carb diet. And that's counterintuitive. But the reason that happens is this, and that is that triglycerides are formed from the conversion of blood glucose to fat in the liver. That's when triglycerides are made. And if you're
Uh-huh.
choking off that blood glucose, if you're lowering that blood glucose, then triglycerides go down. And I've had people have dramatic drops in
Wow.
triglycerides.
Uh-huh.
And the only people that I've had that have had significant increases in cholesterol are I've had a few people over the years that have come to me that are slender to begin with.
Hmm.
Occasionally in slender people, you can see increases in cholesterol on a low carb, high fat diet. But there have been a couple recent studies that have come out that have looked at patients that have high body mass indexes, and they repeatedly show that there is no significant increase in cholesterol. If you have a high BMI to begin with, a low
Uh-huh.
carb, high fat diet won't increase your cholesterol significantly. Now, if you're skinny, it could. But again,
Yeah.
patients don't very often come to me. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, and that makes sense. Yeah. My my cholesterol is kind of funny because the bad stuff is high,
yeah,
but the good stuff's higher.
yeah. HDLs are
And
productive. Yeah, that's
yeah,
great.
and my doctor said I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah,
If it was
I
just the bad
agree.
stuff that was high,
Yeah.
different story. But
Yeah, if you've got a good
well, that's fine.
HDL, it's very protective of cardiovascular disease. That's a good
Yeah,
cholesterol.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but it is so funny because there's all these variations, right?
Yeah. There's all these variations and there's subunits. LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol, has
Right.
become the enemy. But there are different types of LDL cholesterol. And
Ah,
for many people, they can have a high cholesterol, but they don't have the bad type of LDL. And
okay.
so, we really kind of had a mania here of cholesterol phobia over the course of the last 50
Yes, the
years.
cholesterol police. Yeah.
Well, and you alluded to this, who wins from
Uh-huh.
that? Well, the pharmaceutical companies win from it because statins are one of the most, yeah, and that's what the focus is. The focus is lowering LDL cholesterol, and for some people, that doesn't make a difference. So
Mm-hmm.
if they have the bad kind of LDL, if they've had the subunits done, it
Right.
can make a difference. But the majority of people don't have that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 It's yeah. And unfortunately, I think, it there's this one size fits all kind of
yeah, yeah,
thing. It's like if you check this off and check that off, then give them this
right,
pill,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Whether it's appropriate or not.
Yeah. And that's it. That's what so one of my favorite words in my practice is de-prescribing.
Ah,
De-prescribing. I want to bring your blood pressure down with your diet and exercise and weight loss approach so we can de-prescribe your hypertensive medication. Or we with diet, we can have your cholesterol come down. So we can
yeah,
de-prescribe your statin. Or if you're diabetic, we can de-prescribe your insulin. So that's kind of my goal in life. And, I've been very successful with a number of patients helping them achieve that.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that the other negative that has come out of all of this emphasis on cholesterol right, as being the worst
Yeah.
thing. And that's all anybody tests for, and it's all anybody looks at. Is that there are other things. There are other things that can go wrong. And if you're not testing for those, particularly as we get older,
Yeah.
they get missed until you can't do anything about them.
Well, I'll tell you the biggest comparison there that I see in my practice, and it's plain
Mm-hmm.
as day, is okay, cholesterol or insulin resistance level. I literally, draw insulin levels on patients,
Uh-huh.
which most
Right.
primary care docs don't do. And
Mm-mm.
if you draw a simultaneous fasting insulin level and fasting blood glucose, you can do a calculation because there's a relationship between the two. If your insulin's a little bit high, it should be pushing your blood glucose down. If your
Uh-huh.
insulin's a little bit high and it's not doing that, then that means you have insulin resistance. So you plug those normals in,
Okay. That
form
makes sense.
those numbers into a formula. So the technical name is HOMA-IR, HOMA-IR, which is homeostat acronym for homeostatic model of insulin resistance. And it tells you exactly how much insulin resistance people have.
Interesting.
And you mentioned we aren't paying attention sometimes to the things that we should be paying attention to.
Uh-huh.
People sometimes are focused on this cholesterol level of, 205, which is very elevated. And then their insulin resistance really is, I mean, it is the issue in terms of their overall health and longevity long
Uh-huh.
term. And
Yeah.
that's what really, for the majority of my patients, that's what needs to be focused on. Only 20% of your cholesterol level is influenced by diet. 80% of your cholesterol is made in the liver to begin with. Only 20% is influenced by diet. And
Oh.
so for most people, the insulin resistance issue, which is one of the reasons they're overweight to begin with, is
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
so
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Huh. Okay. So, and where can people find you other than just your book?
okay. So I'll make a couple
I'll put
plugs
all
here.
that in the
Okay.
show notes. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So the website for my practice is metabolicmds.com, metabolicmds.com. And I take care of
Okay.
patients in Ohio, Indiana, Florida, and Arizona. We do a lot of our work by telemedicine, and we can do everything, prescribe the CGMs, get the lab work done, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
The name of the book is The Continuous Glucose Monitor Revolution for Non-Diabetics, and it's on Amazon now. So if you just go to Amazon and look at think continuous glucose monitor and then add revolution, then you'll go
Uh-huh.
ahead and the book. I'm going to make a plug. I'm having a Zoom seminar on July
Ah,
11th, especially
uh-huh.
interested in anybody in Ohio, Indiana, Florida, and Arizona attending to that. But you can just go to the Metabolic MD's website and sign up for that. And it's kind of some of what we've talked about here, but we're going to leave plenty of time for questions and answers as part of that. And then I got about 58,000 followers on, I don't know how you're going to look at this, but 58,000 followers on TikTok,
Oh,
with
okay.
short
Yeah.
videos on metabolic
That's the
health.
new
And
one.
that's the new one. Yeah. The craze. And that is it at dr.colo.md. So at dr.colo.md. And then I'm on Twitter at Dr. Colo MD. So at DRKOLOMD.
Okay.
And then got a number of videos on my YouTube channel, which is at Metabolic MDs.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good.
All
And we'll
right.
we'll put all of that or a link to somewhere
Okay.
for people to find all of that.
I
Um,
appreciate you doing that.
Probably it's probably on your website. I would think all those things are on there,
Yeah,
right?
all that stuff is on my website. If people get to
Okay.
metabolicmds.com, then
Yeah.
you'll get all my information. But I would appreciate you going to Amazon and having a look at the book as well.
Yeah.
Really, what we've talked about here is all in the book.
Uh-huh.
And it really. I think this is, I mean, I use the word revolution in the title, but it's a revolutionary approach that I think is going to become more common. I've had the satisfaction of helping change some people's lives over the course of the last few years, and I think people can change their lives by embracing this approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Is there some kind of a metabolic doctor association that's out
There
there?
is, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. SMHP. Okay. Based out of San Diego, actually. And then there's
Okay.
a second organization called Low Carb USA. Guy named Doug
Ah,
Reynolds runs it. He does a great
huh.
job. So if you're interested in learning more about this kind of approach to improving your health, go to,
Uh-huh.
I think it's smhp.org, but Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, or
Okay.
go to Low Carb USA. And there are
Okay.
links to all of that on my website as well.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, because not everybody lives in the states
I
that you're dealing
understand.
with right now.
I'm going to give you another plug though. I actually have people that have will so the telemedicine rules are such
Yes.
that the person
Right.
physically has to be in that state if you're going to take care of them. So like
Ah,
I have people that live in Chicago that drive Indiana so that we can do their visits. So
I
yeah.
love it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's again, it's satisfying. And then when those people have big changes in their lives,
Oh
you
yeah.
reverse
Oh
disease,
yeah.
it's very satisfying. We didn't
Yeah.
talk about, but I will, and I won't plug this too much, but
Uh,
when you lose the weight and you lower your insulin resistance, you actually can reverse a lot of the symptoms that go with that. So, example, a lot of people just have GERD, their gastroesophageal reflux disease.
yes. Yes.
There's a belief, and I believe it's true, that the reason that, for example, some people might have knee pain is not, I mean, the logical thought is, oh, you're carrying around all this excess weight. Of course, you're going to have knee pain. But a lot of that can be from directly having a high blood glucose because your cartilage gets what's called glycosylated. It gets glucose molecules attached to it. That causes
Okay.
inflammation. So just bringing down your glucose in and of itself can change a lot of the symptoms of these other,
Mm,
GERD, musculoskeletal pain, sleep apnea. We talked about the energy and the brain fog issues. And again, I'm not going to
uh-huh.
say
Yeah.
this is a panacea, but I think again, I'm going to leave your listeners with this advice. After 30 years in the emergency department, if you can get your weight under control and you can get your blood glucose under control, you're going to
Hmm.
head off a majority of those things that will bring you eventually to the emergency department.
Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And then add on the strength training
Add
and
on
you've
strength
pretty
training.
much covered
You've got
covered
it.
everything you need.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a good way for people to live. And I think more people are learning about it and it's going to be more popular going forward.
Yeah. 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 No, I totally agree. Okay, well let me say, and this is gonna this always sounds really funny when when I have a doctor on and I say this,
Yeah.
which is that neither of us are doctors, which isn't exactly true, but um, let me just also say that this is should not be seen as medical
Medical
advice.
advice. It's not.
You
You're right.
need to
Yeah.
go out and talk to people having to do with what your own issues are,
Yes.
in order to really work through some of these things. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you probably agree with that as well.
I agree 100% with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can make general comments, but everybody has a different situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So thank you for being on, and I will see everybody else next week.